The morning that changed everything. It didn't happen all at once. One morning you simply stood up, and the floor tilted just slightly. Not enough to fall, just enough to freeze. Maybe you reached for the wall. Maybe you sat back down and pretended you forgot something. Maybe you laughed it off, but inside, you felt it. That quiet shift when your body starts whispering, something's off. Not pain, not illness, just uncertainty. In your legs, in your breath, in the rhythm of your mornings. And maybe no one noticed. Maybe you didn't even tell them. You just started doing things slower. Waking up earlier, sitting longer, avoiding stairs. You didn't ask for more pills. You didn't want to. You just wanted to feel steady again. To trust your own steps. To enjoy breakfast without feeling like your heart was racing or your head might float away. And here's the truth. You're not broken. You're not weak. You're just missing a few pieces no one told you mattered. Just a few simple foods. No prescriptions needed, and mornings feel different again. Avocados, the silent healer. Tom never really bought into the health food trend. At 72, he liked what he liked. Plain toast, black coffee, and as he always joked, food that doesn't try too hard. But everything changed the day he stood in the grocery store and the room began to spin. It wasn't dramatic. No fall, no panic. Just that quiet, unsettling feeling that his body was asking for something, and he didn't know what. His daughter noticed. A week later, she came by with a paper bag. No medication, no lecture, just one ripe avocado and a note that said, "Try this on toast." So he did. Half an avocado, mashed, a dash of lemon, nothing fancy. But within days, the difference was real. His mornings weren't filled with heart flutters or that strange slow-motion start. He felt steadier walking down the porch stairs. Even his doctor paused during a routine checkup and said, "Your numbers look calmer." It wasn't magic. It was science. Avocados are rich in oleic acid, a heart-healthy fat that lowers bad cholesterol and raises good cholesterol. They contain more potassium than bananas, helping relax the walls of blood vessels and bring blood pressure into balance. For seniors, that's huge. But there's more. The fats in avocados also help the body absorb fat-soluble vitamins like D, E, and K up to 15 times more efficiently. That means when Tom ate his usual salad, his body finally got the nutrients it had been missing for years. And maybe that's why he didn't stop. Now every morning, Tom sits by the kitchen window with his toast, a spoonful of green, and a quiet kind of gratitude. If you've ever skipped breakfast because you were afraid it would make you feel worse, maybe this small fruit is your place to begin. And for Diane, the next change didn't come in something green. It came in something crisp, red, and oddly familiar. Apples, the gut's quiet guardian. Diane never thought of apples as medicine. To her, they were just a habit. Something her grandmother packed in her lunch every Sunday, something she sliced for her children when they were little. It wasn't until her own digestion began to change that she started wondering, what if the answer isn't in something new, but in something I've always known? At 68, Diane had been dealing with bloating that made her avoid meals and a quiet discomfort that crept in after every dinner. Her doctor mentioned fiber, probiotics, maybe supplements. But Diane wanted something simpler, something that felt like food, not a fix. So she went back to apples. Red, green, or yellow, it didn't matter. She started with one a day, eaten slowly in the afternoon. Within a week, her gut started to feel less unpredictable, less tight. She stopped skipping meals. She started sleeping better. And for the first time in months, she woke up hungry, not anxious. Behind that small shift was a powerful science most people overlook. Apples are packed with pectin, a soluble fiber that feeds the good bacteria in your gut, helping digestion, boosting immunity, and even enhancing how your body absorbs nutrients. For older adults, where gut flora naturally diminishes with age, that's not just helpful, it's essential. Pectin also binds to bad cholesterol in the digestive tract, helping remove it from the body and gently lowering LDL levels over time. And apples offer something else, quercetin, a plant flavonoid that reduces inflammation and supports cardiovascular health. For Diane, who'd begun to feel pressure in her chest when climbing stairs, that simple apple became a quiet form of protection. But perhaps the most unexpected benefit came when she visited the dentist. Her gums looked healthier, less inflammation, less sensitivity. She mentioned the apple habit, almost as a joke. Her dentist smiled and said, "You'd be surprised how something that simple can make all the difference." So Diane kept going. Now, every afternoon, she sits by the kitchen counter, slices her apple thin, and eats it slowly like a small ceremony. A way to say, I still care for this body, even now, especially now. If you've ever skipped a meal because you were afraid of how your stomach would react, maybe it's not about avoiding food, but choosing one that listens. For Ray, though, the trouble didn't start with skipping food. It started with a fruit that felt too easy, too sweet, and far more dangerous than anyone warned him. Grapes, the sweet trap. Ray thought he was doing the right thing. At 75, he'd given up cookies, said goodbye to soda, even started walking after dinner. But every afternoon, while watching the news, he'd reach for a bowl of grapes, cool, sweet, refreshing. He told himself it was a healthy habit. His doctor never said otherwise. And besides, how could fruit be bad? It wasn't until his annual checkup that the numbers told a different story. His blood sugar had climbed. His A1C crept dangerously close to diabetic levels. And when the nurse showed him the daily log, there it was, right at 3 p.m. every day, snacked on grapes. That small, seemingly harmless routine had been silently overwhelming his system. The problem with grapes isn't that they're fruit. It's how they behave once they're in your body, especially in older adults. Grapes are loaded with glucose and fructose, the two fastest absorbing sugars. They come with almost no fiber to slow that absorption down. So when you eat a handful or two, it's like pouring sugar straight into your bloodstream. 1 cup contains nearly 23 grams of sugar, the same as a small candy bar. And unlike candy, you rarely stop at 1 cup. Ray didn't realize he was consuming the sugar equivalent of dessert every single day. The result? Energy crashes, weight gain around the midsection, and inflammation that made his joints ache even when he hadn't done much. There was another concern too. Grapes are often covered in pesticide residue unless they're organic. For someone like Ray, who had a weakened immune system and a sensitive gut, that chemical exposure wasn't just unhelpful. It was potentially harmful. What hurt most was the sense of betrayal. He'd been trying, doing what the world told him was smart. But no one warned him that some fruits, especially when overconsumed, could turn against the very body they're supposed to help. So he made a shift. He swapped the grapes for a sliced apple, sometimes a few berries, and something strange happened. The swelling in his fingers eased, his blood sugar leveled, his energy didn't crash by dinner time. Ray still watches the news every afternoon, but now he does it with something his body actually thanks him for. If you've ever chosen fruit thinking it had to be good for you, only to feel worse afterward, maybe it's not about cutting fruit out, but cutting the right ones out. Because for Linda, the real solution didn't come from taking something away. It came from adding something her heart had been missing all along. Pomegranate, heart medicine in disguise. Linda had reached her limit. The cabinet above her sink already held 7 prescription bottles, each with a name she could barely pronounce, each with a list of side effects longer than the benefits. Her doctor wanted to add 1 more for her blood pressure. But Linda was tired. Not tired like sleepy, tired like worn down. From the pills, from the side effects, from feeling like her body was always being managed but never truly helped. So she asked a different question. Is there anything I can eat that helps the heart without another pill? That's when she discovered pomegranate. Half a cup a day. That's all it took. Not a gallon of juice, not a radical diet, just a small daily ritual. Cracking open the fruit, spooning out the seeds and letting them melt slowly in her mouth. A little tart, a little sweet, but quietly powerful. What Linda didn't expect was how quickly her body responded. Her systolic blood pressure, the top number, dropped by 10 points within a month. The tightness in her chest eased, her walks became less labored, and perhaps most remarkably, her memory, fuzzy and frustrating for years, began to feel sharper, like someone had opened a window and let light in. The science backed it all up. Pomegranate is packed with punicalagins, powerful antioxidants that reduce oxidative stress in arteries by up to 30%. That means less inflammation, better blood flow, and a lower risk of clots and stiffness that can lead to stroke or heart attack. Studies show its antioxidant power can be up to 3 times stronger than red wine or green tea. But the benefits didn't stop at the heart. In a UCLA study, seniors who drank pomegranate juice daily saw real improvements in verbal memory. For Linda, who had started forgetting names and leaving things in the microwave, that small change felt deeply personal. And here's the thing. You don't need to drink a full glass every day. Even half a cup of seeds or a splash of 100% pure juice in your smoothie is enough to bring real benefits. There's one caveat. If you're on blood thinners or statins, you should talk to your doctor. Pomegranate can slightly enhance the effects of certain medications. But for many seniors, it becomes part of a food-based recovery, not another medical burden. Now, Linda still keeps her prescriptions where they are, but beside them, a bowl of fresh pomegranates and a quiet sense of control. Because sometimes the answer isn't more medicine. It's knowing which fruit is doing the real healing. If you've ever whispered, "I don't want more pills," this little red fruit might be the thing you were hoping for. But while Linda's healing came from a fruit she'd never tried before, Sandra's trouble began with one that felt familiar and almost too healthy. Grapefruit, the medication Saboteur. For Sandra, health had always been about discipline. She took her medications exactly as prescribed, walked every morning, even when her knees ached, ate light meals, watched her salt, and every other day she'd peel half a grapefruit and eat it slowly by the window, feeling proud of herself for sticking to something clean. So when the dizzy spells started, she assumed it was just age. But something didn't sit right. Her blood pressure readings were fluctuating. Her cholesterol meds, once stable, now seemed to cause odd side effects. Her sleep became restless. Her heart beat. Strange. It wasn't until her pharmacist reviewed her chart and asked one quiet question that everything clicked. "Do you eat grapefruit?" Sandra blinked. "Of course," she said. "Why?" "Here's why. Grapefruit contains furanocoumarins, natural compounds that interfere with a key enzyme in your gut, CYP3A4. That enzyme is responsible for processing over 85 medications, including some of the most commonly prescribed to seniors. Statins for cholesterol, calcium channel blockers for blood pressure, anti-anxiety meds, and even antihistamines. When you eat grapefruit, it doesn't just block that enzyme, it shuts it down. That means even a small dose of your medication suddenly behaves like an overdose, circulating longer, hitting harder, and increasing your risk of side effects. And here's the kicker. One glass of grapefruit juice can affect your system for up to 72 hours. So Sandra's grapefruit habit, something she believed was helping her, was actually putting her at risk. Not because grapefruit is inherently bad, but because her medications couldn't work properly while it was in her system. The worst part? No one had warned her. No label on the fruit. No bright sticker at the grocery store. Just a quiet interaction happening inside her gut, turning careful doses into dangerous ones. She stopped eating it. Slowly, her side effects faded. Her heartbeat evened out. Her doctor didn't need to adjust the dosage, because now the meds were working the way they were designed to. Sandra still eats fruit. She still sits by the window. But now, there's no grapefruit on the plate, and no more guessing games with her body. If you've ever felt worse despite following instructions, the issue might not be the pill, but the piece of fruit next to it. For George, though, the answer wasn't about removing anything. It was about adding something tiny, powerful, and delicious, something that helped him stay sharp, even when memories started to blur. Berries. Brain food that tastes like dessert. It started with names. At first, George would forget the name of a neighbor, or mix up which grandchild liked peanut butter and which one didn't. He laughed it off. Just old age, he'd say, tapping his forehead. But deep down, he knew it was more than that. He had watched his wife fade slowly into Alzheimer's. And when he stood in the kitchen one morning and couldn't remember why he had walked in, the fear hit him like a wave. But George wasn't looking for a miracle. He didn't want to reverse time. He just wanted to stay present, steady, aware of the world he loved. That's when a friend at church told him about berries. Not supplements, not brain games, just berries. He started with blueberries, fresh, sometimes frozen. Added a few raspberries when he could. It wasn't a strategy. It was just something small, something real, something sweet that didn't feel like medicine. And then something shifted. He wasn't forgetting as much. The fog that had crept in during the afternoons didn't seem as thick. He could hold a story from beginning to end again. Not perfectly, but enough to feel like himself. The science behind it is powerful and growing. Berries, especially blueberries, raspberries, and blackberries, are rich in anthocyanins, natural plant compounds that reduce inflammation and cross the blood-brain barrier, meaning they can directly protect your brain. In one landmark study, seniors who ate just 2 servings of berries per week delayed cognitive aging by up to 2.5 years. That's not just about memory, it's about holding on to your sense of self. Berries also improve balance and coordination, 2 things that become crucial in preventing falls, one of the leading causes of injury for older adults. And for those managing blood sugar, the fiber and bioactive compounds in berries helps stabilize glucose after meals, reducing dangerous spikes and crashes. For George, the change wasn't dramatic, it was quietly powerful. He didn't need reminders taped to the fridge. He didn't feel nervous reaching for a word in conversation. He felt steady. Every morning now, he sprinkles a handful of berries onto his oatmeal. Not because someone told him to, but because they make him feel clear, connected, and confident. They taste like dessert, he says, but they feel like armor. If you've ever whispered, "I just want to remember," berries might be your best ally. But while George's recovery was soft and sweet, Frank's struggle was hidden in plain sight, inside 2 foods he always believed were harmless. Until his stomach told him otherwise. Dried fruits and unripe bananas, the hidden triggers. It always happened after lunch. Frank would sit back in his chair, press a hand to his side and wait. The bloating came first, then the gas. Sometimes even a wave of sharp, twisting discomfort that left him too tired to finish the crossword. He tried eating slower, cutting out dairy, drinking more water. Nothing worked. Then one day his granddaughter visited and asked a simple question. "Grandpa, why do you eat raisins if they make your tummy hurt?" Frank paused, looked down at the trail mix he ate every day, and for the first time he asked himself that question too. He had always thought dried fruits were healthy. Apricots, prunes, dates, they came from fruit, right? But what he didn't realize was just how concentrated they had become. When fruit is dried, the water disappears, but the sugar doesn't. In fact, it becomes more dense and aggressive. A small handful of dried apricots contains nearly the same sugar load as eating 4 or 5 whole ones. And without the water and bulk to slow digestion, it floods the system fast, especially for seniors with slower metabolism and weakened insulin sensitivity. And then came the sulfites, chemical preservatives used to keep dried fruits looking fresh. For people with asthma or compromised lungs, these additives can trigger flare-ups, shortness of breath, and even inflammation throughout the body. Frank had COPD. He just never connected the dots. But it wasn't just dried fruits. He also ate bananas, specifically green ones. He liked the firm texture, said the ripe ones were too mushy. But those unripe bananas were causing another kind of trouble. Unlike their ripe cousins, green bananas are packed with resistant starch, a type of fiber that doesn't break down easily. For aging digestive systems already slowed by reduced enzyme activity, this can lead to intense gas, cramping, and even malabsorption of nutrients from other foods. So even when Frank thought he was eating clean, his gut was in survival mode, fighting against the very things he thought were helping. The solution? Small shifts. He replaced the raisins with a sliced apple, chose fully ripe bananas with a few spots instead of green ones. Within 2 weeks, the bloating eased. His energy improved, and one day after lunch, he sat back in his chair, waited, and nothing happened. He smiled. Because sometimes healing isn't about big changes. It's about listening to the small alarms your body rings and answering with kindness. If you've ever blamed your stomach without knowing what triggered it, it might not be your age. It might just be the fruit on your plate. But for all of them, Tom, Diane, Ray, Linda, Sandra, George, and Frank, there was one thread that tied their stories together. Not medicine, not willpower, just the quiet decision to try again, differently. Morning again. No grand breakthroughs, just a quiet return to something you thought you'd lost. They didn't make sweeping lifestyle changes. Tom didn't start jogging, Diane didn't sign up for a meal plan, Ray didn't become a nutrition expert overnight, but each of them made one small choice: one fruit, one shift, one silent promise to treat their body not like a problem, but like something worth listening to. And mornings began to change. Tom no longer needed to grip the counter before walking to the porch. Diane stopped skipping meals out of fear. Ray could go a whole afternoon without crashing. Linda's blood pressure finally steadied without needing a new prescription. Sandra felt safe taking her meds again. George remembered stories all the way to the end. And Frank? He could eat lunch without bracing for the pain. None of them called it a transformation, but each of them felt something coming back. Not youth, not perfection, just presence, confidence, the quiet ability to trust themselves again. Because sometimes healing doesn't begin with a diagnosis, it begins with breakfast. And if any part of this journey feels like yours, type 1 if you've ever whispered just don't fall before your feet touch the floor. Type 2 if you've ever eaten something healthy, felt worse, and blamed yourself. Type 3 if you still believe food can help you feel steady again, without prescriptions. I read every comment, because your quiet story might be exactly what someone else needs. If this resonated with you, I think you'll really connect with the next video below, or save it for a morning that feels a little too heavy. You're not alone, and your next morning can feel different.